Why does a $50 gift card feel like free money, while $50 sitting in your checking account feels like something you have to be careful with? It's the exact same amount, spendable at the exact same stores, worth the exact same $50 at checkout. But hand most people a gift card, and they'll buy something they'd normally talk themselves out of. The pricier item, the impulse add-on, the thing that felt unnecessary 5 minutes earlier. Hand the same person $50 of their own cash, and suddenly they're comparison shopping. Same number, two completely different decisions. That's not a math problem. That's a feelings problem, and it's been quietly running your financial life longer than you've probably noticed. Researchers were testing a version of this exact question decades before gift cards existed. In the 1980s, people were asked to imagine two nearly identical nights out. In the first, you're on your way to buy a $10 theater ticket and discover you've lost a $10 bill somewhere along the way. Do you still buy the ticket? Most people said yes, 88% in the original study. In the second version, you've already bought the ticket in advance, and you lose the ticket itself instead of the cash. Do you buy a replacement? This time, only 46% said yes. A newer version of the same study, run decades later, found almost the same gap. Both situations cost exactly $10. Both leave you with exactly one decision. Your wallet cannot tell the two nights apart. Something else clearly can. That something is called mental accounting, a term coined by the economist Richard Thaler to describe a pattern that shows up in almost everyone's financial life. Your brain doesn't track one running total of your money. It keeps several, an account for entertainment, one for groceries, one for bills, one that might as well be labeled fun money, one for savings. And it treats a dollar completely differently depending on which account it thinks that dollar belongs to. Lose the cash, and your brain quietly charges it to a vague money I misplaced account that has nothing to do with tonight's show. The entertainment budget stays untouched. Buy the ticket, lose the ticket itself, and the loss gets charged directly to entertainment. So replacing it suddenly means this one show costs $20, even though in actual dollars, both nights cost exactly the same $10. Money is supposed to be interchangeable. A dollar is a dollar, no matter where it came from. Your brain disagrees, and it disagrees consistently enough to shape real decisions, not just survey answers. That explains why the same $50 can feel like two different amounts depending on what you call it. But it raises a bigger question. What happens when the label isn't about where the money is going, but where it came from in the first place? Source is one of the strongest labels your brain assigns, and it can flip a dollar into a different account before you've consciously decided anything. Take money that arrives feeling like a windfall, a bonus, a tax refund, any bit of cash that shows up as a surprise instead of a paycheck. Researchers who study this have a half-joking name for the split it creates: happy money versus unhappy money. Money you had to grind for tends to go toward the responsible, dutiful stuff: rent, groceries, the electric bill. Money that arrives feeling like a windfall gets treated as though it barely counts as real income and tends to go toward things that are fun rather than necessary. The effect is strong enough that the exact same total behaves differently depending on how it arrives. A $1,200 tax refund landing in March as one lump sum is far more likely to fund a new television or a short trip than that same $1,200 would have, arriving instead as an extra $50 folded quietly into every paycheck across the year. Same amount, same source, same tax treatment. The only thing that changed was which account the label sent it to. But spending isn't the only behavior these labels can change. The same bias that decides how easily you'll spend a windfall also shapes something riskier: how much risk feels acceptable to take with it. Researchers studying gambling behavior found that people who just won money were noticeably more willing to risk it on another bet than they were willing to risk an equivalent amount of their own original money. The origin of the phrase playing with house money. The dollars you walked in with feel like yours. The dollars you just won feel borrowed somehow, even though the second you win them, they're identically real. The same pattern shows up outside casinos. Investors who've just profited on a trade tend to take bigger risks with those specific gains than they would with money from any other source. Proof this was never really about gambling. It's about what a recent gain quietly does to your sense of what you can afford to lose. And the effect doesn't stop at how much risk feels acceptable. It can also decide which financial problem feels most urgent to fix. Not just what you buy, and not just how much you're willing to risk, but which debt you choose to attack first. Researchers studying people carrying multiple debts found a strong, consistent pattern. Given the choice, most people pay off their smallest balance first, almost regardless of the interest rate attached to it. Mathematically, that's often the wrong move. A $4,000 balance charging 22% interest should get extra payments before a $500 balance charging 6% every time, if the only goal is minimizing total interest paid. But debt, in most people's heads, isn't one number. It's several separate accounts, one per card, one per loan, and closing an entire account, even a small one, produces a feeling of progress that chipping away at a bigger one doesn't. This is where mental accounting stops being about what you buy and starts shaping strategy. The debt with the worst math almost always has the weaker emotional pull, and the account with the best emotional payoff is rarely the one actually costing the most. Run a simple version of the numbers. Say you're carrying a $500 balance at 6% and a $4,000 balance at 22%, with an extra $100 a month to put toward one of them. Paying off the small one first feels like winning. An account closed, a line item gone, one fewer bill arriving every month. Paying down the large one first is the better move mathematically, because every dollar sitting at 22% is quietly costing far more than a dollar sitting at 6%. It just doesn't produce that same clean, done feeling for a long time, which creates an interesting possibility. If mental accounts can distort what you buy, how much risk feels acceptable, and which debt feels most urgent, can the same mechanism be pointed in the other direction on purpose? Here's the part worth sitting with. None of this is a flaw you can simply switch off. Mental accounting is closer to the operating system your brain runs financial decisions on by default. Not a bug you can patch with more willpower. But if the accounts are going to exist, whether you like it or not, you can still design them instead of inheriting them by accident. Envelope budgeting, sinking funds, a savings account specifically labeled emergency or vacation instead of just sitting in general savings, all of it is mental accounting deployed on purpose. A dollar sitting in an account literally named emergency fund gets treated with more restraint than the same dollar sitting in a general checking balance. For the exact same psychological reason, a lost ticket gets treated differently than lost cash. The bias that quietly drains a windfall or drags out a debt payoff is the same bias that, pointed in the other direction, can make saving feel almost automatic. You're probably already running a version of this system without ever naming it. There's money that feels like grocery money, money that feels like rent money, money that feels like fun money. And $50 behaves completely differently depending on which of those labels it's wearing when you spend it, even though a 50 is a 50 everywhere it goes. The question worth asking isn't whether you have these accounts, because you already do. It's whether you assign the labels on purpose, or whether the labels got assigned to you by whichever account the money happened to land in first. So go back to the gift card, and the lost ticket, and the tax refund, and the small credit card balance you paid off first even though it wasn't the expensive one. None of those were ever separate stories. They were the same pattern wearing different clothes. The amount on paper staying fixed while the feeling attached to it quietly did all the deciding. Your brain doesn't actually budget in dollars. It budgets in feelings, and then backfills the math to make the decision look reasonable afterward. The version of you that's better with money isn't the version with more willpower. It's the version that notices which account a decision is quietly being filed under before the label makes the choice instead of you. If this kind of financial pattern is useful to you, subscribe, because a new one gets broken down every week.